"Ma'am, I need to see your boarding pass again," the flight attendant said with a dismissive tone. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the boarding pass. "Your boarding pass has to be confirmed first before you're allowed to board. Step aside for others to board." Elise, the black CEO, extended her boarding pass again, her expression calm despite the rising storm inside her. She knew exactly what was happening, but she refused to show anger. Her tone remained steady. "There's no mistake. I'm in seat 2A," she replied, her voice unwavering. But her words were ignored. The moment the flight attendant saw the ticket, she waved it off as if it didn't matter. "Please step aside, ma'am. I'll need to check with security," she said, her voice raising just slightly. The frustration in her voice was apparent now. Within seconds, a security guard appeared at Elise's side. He grabbed her arm with a firm, unnecessary grip as she tried to explain the situation. His fingers dug into the fabric of her suit jacket as he began pulling her away from the gate. Elise didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. But the moment was tense. Around her, the other passengers watched quietly. Some looked concerned, others indifferent, while a few nodded approvingly, thinking perhaps she was just another disruptive passenger. But then something unexpected happened. The massive departure screens that hung throughout the terminal flickered, going completely black. Every electronic display on the terminal froze. The PA system cut off abruptly mid-sentence, and the usual bustle of the airport began to quiet down. The confusion escalated as passengers, who were boarding moments before, stopped in their tracks, looking around in disbelief. The airline staff were scrambling at their desks, trying to figure out what was going on, but to no avail. "Security glitch," someone murmured. Others whispered about possible delays, but no one knew what was really happening. Gate 37B was plunged into a rare kind of chaos. Luggage scattered across the floor, airline staff trying desperately to bring some semblance of order but failing miserably. What had seemed like an ordinary flight delay was turning into something much more significant. This wasn't just another disruption. It was only the beginning of what would become a monumental event. This was no small matter. Elise had just been publicly humiliated for no reason other than the color of her skin. But instead of bowing down to the injustice, she was about to make the airline regret ever underestimating her. Have you ever faced discrimination at an airport? Share your experiences in the comments below. If you stand against prejudice and injustice, hit that subscribe button right now and type justice in the comments. This story is just getting started. Who exactly is Elise Washington? How did she become powerful enough to bring an entire airline to its knees? Elise's rise to becoming one of the most influential tech CEOs in America was nothing short of extraordinary. She came from a background far different from most of her peers in Silicon Valley, who were raised in elite neighborhoods, often with connections to powerful families and resources. Elise came from humble beginnings, where her mother worked 3 jobs just to make ends meet. The neighborhood she grew up in was a place where stories of success were rare, and even rarer was someone who dared to dream of escaping that life. From a young age, Elise had an affinity for technology. By 16, while her peers were out at the mall or spending time on their phones, Elise was fixing old electronics she found in pawn shops and teaching herself to code on an outdated computer her high school teacher had salvaged for her. At 17, she was already making enough money to help her mother pay the rent by fixing computers for local businesses. For Elise, it wasn't a hobby. It was survival. When it came time to apply for colleges, despite scoring perfectly on her SATs, she was waitlisted by nearly every top tech school she applied to. However, she didn't give up. She finally got accepted to Northwestern University on a partial scholarship, but not without a fight. She had to work 2 jobs just to get by while carrying a full course load. After graduating, Elise's career took an uphill battle. At her first tech job, she watched as her male colleagues, some with less experience than her, were promoted over her. When she developed an innovative scheduling algorithm that saved the company millions, her manager took credit for it. When she spoke up, she was labeled difficult and not a team player. But Elise didn't break. Instead of trying to fight a system built against her, she created her own path. At 28, Elise mortgaged everything she had to launch Nexus Technologies, a startup that would go on to disrupt the entire tech industry. She didn't have money to pay employees, so she brought on 3 fellow graduates who believed in her vision and work. By 43, Nexus Technologies had grown into a global enterprise with over 5,000 employees and reported profits of $1.2 billion. Elise Washington had gone from a small-town girl fixing computers to a force of nature, completely transforming an industry. The morning of the incident, Elise was preparing for what might have been the most important deal of her career. She stood in her penthouse apartment, overlooking Central Park. She was packing lightly for her trip to Singapore, where she would deliver the keynote address at the Global Tech Innovation Summit. Elise was set to secure a $500 million investment from the Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund, an investment that would expand Nexus Technologies into a whole new market. But unlike other executives who traveled with entourages, Elise preferred to travel alone on long flights. It gave her time to think and strategize, to get ahead of the competition. She dressed comfortably but professionally in black trousers, a silk blouse, and a tailored blazer. The only luxury she allowed herself was a pair of handcrafted leather loafers, evidence of her hard work and success. But little did she know, as Elise made her way to the airport that morning, her day was about to take an unexpected turn. She was about to meet Bradley Winters, the CEO of SkyGlobe Airlines, a company that had once been the pride of American aviation, but had recently fallen into disrepair under his leadership. Bradley Winters, at 68 years old, had inherited the role of CEO almost as a birthright. His grandfather founded SkyGlobe Airlines, and his father expanded it. But now, under Bradley's leadership, the once proud airline had lost its way. At 68, he still exuded the image of a distinguished executive, always impeccably dressed in bespoke suits, his silver hair neatly combed. But what appeared to be sophistication on the outside was hiding something much deeper and more troublesome. As Elise entered LaGuardia's Terminal B, the frustration began. She approached the premium check-in area where first-class passengers were usually greeted with luxury and ease. But before she could even reach the counter, the gate agent intercepted her. "Economy check-in is that way, ma'am," the agent said dismissively, pointing toward the crowded line of economy passengers. Elise paused, her voice steady but polite. "I'm flying first class to Singapore." She showed the agent her boarding pass on her phone. The agent barely looked at it, her eyes scanning over it with indifference. "Economy check-in is that way," she repeated, now with visible impatience. Elise didn't argue. She simply walked to the premium counter anyway and was greeted by another agent who processed her check-in without issue. However, the agent double-checked her ticket, looking visibly surprised that someone like Elise would be flying in first class. As she walked to security with her carry-on and briefcase, she was directed to the premium security line, which was mostly empty, another perk of flying first class. But when Elise approached the TSA checkpoint, things took a turn. A TSA agent waved her out of the premium lane, sending her to the random security check. "Ma'am, you'll need to go through enhanced screening," he said. Elise looked around, noticing that all the other passengers being sent to enhanced screening were people of color. Meanwhile, 3 white businessmen in expensive suits breezed through the premium lane without a second glance from the same TSA agent. When it was her turn, the male TSA agent's pat-down was well beyond standard procedure. His hands lingered too long, and he repeatedly checked the same areas with unnecessary firmness. The humiliation burned inside her, but Elise kept her composure. She had learned long ago that showing anger would only make things worse. She couldn't afford to be labeled the angry black woman. She could already feel the system closing in on her, but she stayed silent. Once the screening was over, Elise realized something was missing. Her watch. Not just any watch, but a custom-designed Patek Philippe worth over $60,000. It had been a personal gift to herself when Nexus Technologies went public. "Excuse me," she said to the TSA agent. "My watch is missing." The agent barely looked up. If it was there, it would have come through. Elise insisted on reviewing the security footage. After 15 minutes of arguing, a supervisor miraculously found the watch in a separate bin, one that Elise had never used. By the time she reached Gate 37B, Elise was already running behind schedule. Boarding for her flight to Singapore had begun, but she still had plenty of time to board. But what happened next would change everything. As Elise Washington stood there, facing an increasingly chaotic scene, the air around her seemed to shift. What had started as a simple, albeit frustrating boarding process at an airport terminal had turned into a public spectacle. Elise had seen it all in her years as a tech CEO: endless negotiations, difficult clients, and tense board meetings. But nothing had prepared her for the blatant discrimination she was now experiencing in full public view. In the midst of the mounting tension, Bradley Winters, Sky Globe's CEO, had yet to grasp the depth of the consequences unfolding around him. He stood there, his back straight, the facade of calmness crumbling beneath the weight of the growing pressure. Elise's calm demeanor, though, was something he hadn't anticipated. What was supposed to be a routine procedure had turned into an irreversible setback for his company, but Elise wasn't done yet. She had seen enough. Her sharp gaze met his, and her words cut through the terminal. "I have been patient, Mr. Winters," she said, her voice clear, without a trace of emotion. "You don't get to dismiss me like this. Your staff's blatant bias and lack of respect are unacceptable, and you know it." The weight of her words hung in the air like a thunderstorm waiting to break. The small crowd, once indifferent to her plight, now hung on every word, their attention shifting from the escalating situation to her poised figure standing against the tide. Elise wasn't just an individual demanding respect. She represented an entire community, a community that had long been denied its rightful place at the table. In that moment, the sound of a ringing phone broke the tense silence. Elise's phone buzzed in her hand, the custom ringtone confirming what she already knew. It was Marcus, her trusted chief strategy officer. She quickly answered. "Marcus, what's the status?" Elise asked, her voice shifting to business mode, as if she were back in the boardroom. "Elise, we've got a situation," Marcus began, urgency in his tone. "The Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund needs our recommendation for the global corporate contract. We have to make a decision now." Elise's mind was already working at full speed, calculating the moves she needed to make. This wasn't just about being denied a first-class seat. This was about something much bigger. Sky Globe's refusal to acknowledge its systemic issues was threatening not only her dignity, but also her company's business dealings. And Elise Washington wasn't about to let them off the hook. "Get me everything we need for the meeting," she said, her voice cold. "And I want Sky Globe removed from consideration immediately." Marcus hesitated for a moment, but then replied, "Understood. But there's something else. There's talk about the potential divestment from Sky Globe. We need to be careful." Elise's eyes narrowed as she processed the information. Behind the scenes, her private investment firm controlled 28% of Sky Globe's shares, more than enough to shake the foundations of the airline's struggling operations. She wasn't just some passenger anymore. She was a powerful force, and her next move would send shockwaves through the corporate world. With a quick nod, Elise hung up the phone and turned her attention back to the chaos unfolding in front of her. She knew this wasn't just about her anymore. This was a statement, a chance to make sure that the corporate world, where power often disregarded people like her, would have to answer for its failures. And she was prepared to make them listen. "I am not here to be treated like this," Elise said, her voice carrying with authority. "I am here because I am a paying customer. I am here because I am someone who has earned my seat, not because I look a certain way or because you choose to stereotype me. Sky Globe needs to understand that it will not continue operating like this without facing consequences." At that moment, the terminals buzzed with activity as more passengers began to gather around. Cameras flashed as several social media users, who had been quietly recording the situation, posted the footage. The hashtag number sign, Sky Globe Reckoning, was beginning to trend, and the world was starting to pay attention. Bradley Winters, who had been dismissive earlier, now appeared to be on the defensive. His posture sagged, and his face, once flushed with authority, turned pale. He knew the situation was rapidly spiraling beyond his control, and with every passing second, he realized that the very institution he had long commanded was about to be exposed for what it was, a company rooted in bias and discriminatory practices. "I think it's time to address this properly, Mr. Winters," Elise continued, her gaze unwavering. "The world is watching now. You will face these consequences whether you like it or not." In the growing commotion, a security guard, who had previously been ignoring the unfolding drama, now approached Elise. His movements were cautious, unsure of how to proceed, especially with so many people watching. Elise could sense the shift in the atmosphere. The very air seemed to be charged with the tension of what was about to unfold. The guard hesitated before addressing her. "Ma'am," the guard said softly, "you need to step aside." Elise's eyes locked with his, and she took a small step forward, her voice steady but firm. "I will not move, not until this is resolved. I am not going anywhere." It was clear that Elise had made her decision. She was going to stand her ground. A sudden voice interrupted the scene. It was another passenger, an older man who had been watching the exchange unfold. He stepped forward and addressed Bradley Winters directly. "Is this how you treat your customers?" the man asked, his voice thick with disdain. "You should be ashamed." The crowd around them began to murmur in agreement. Elise wasn't alone in her fight. People, once silent bystanders, were now starting to find their voices. What was unfolding before them wasn't just a simple case of discrimination. It was a moment of reckoning that touched on broader societal issues. Bradley, clearly shaken by the change in tone, tried to maintain his composure, but the cracks were starting to show. The public was beginning to turn on him, and he could feel the weight of his company's actions closing in. The CEO's once imposing presence was now frail and uncertain. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but—" Bradley started, but Elise cut him off with a single powerful statement. "Don't apologize," she said coldly. "Fix it." She could sense that Bradley was no longer in control. His next move would determine whether Sky Globe Airlines would sink further into scandal or whether it would try to salvage whatever little dignity it had left. The room fell silent, and the cameras continued to roll, capturing every moment of this historic confrontation.